Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is TVP World. You're watching World News Tonight. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee. Ukraine accuses Russia of waging war under the guise of peace. As Putin attends Easter Mass, Zelenskyy says the shelling never stopped. More on that in just a moment, but first, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. Far from home, still at war. Ukrainians mark fourth Easter in exile. Nuclear diplomacy returns with Russia at the table. A space shield for the U.S., Trump calls for a new era in missile defense. Despite Moscow's declared Easter ceasefire, shelling and drone attacks continue to hit targets across Ukraine. Residents in Kyiv dismiss Russia's talk of a ceasefire as just another propaganda stunt. President Zelenskyy reported hundreds of assaults. As fighting rages on, Ukrainian leaders say the so-called truce was never real, calling it a sham from the beginning. Sonia Agatabishyan has the latest.
Has the holiday spirit touched the Russian president's heart? Reflecting on Vladimir Putin's announcement of an Easter ceasefire in his war with Kyiv, local residents have their doubts.
No, of course I don't believe it. Terrorists cannot be trusted, and there is nothing sacred to them. If they believed in anything sacred, they would not have killed civilians and started this horror. Yesterday, after they announced the Easter ceasefire, an air raid alert was issued. Ballistic missiles and Shahed drones flew over. There were explosions caused by ballistic missiles somewhere near Voznesensk. What kind of ceasefire is that?
According to the Ukrainian president, on Easter from the beginning of the day until 4 p.m.
There's been a total of 46 Russian assaults across various directions and 901 instances of shelling, 448 of which involved heavy weaponry.
What we discovered this morning that this so-called ceasefire was not observed. Putin is not keeping its words. It's just a political play.
It's only an exercise in international PR, as you put it very rightly. This is all about sending a message to especially the global south, to tell them that I want peace, I'm the man of peace.
In the past, Putin proposed another holiday ceasefire, which had a similar result.
First was in January 2023. It was Christmas. Again, Putin tried to show himself kind of a Christian, which is crazy because he's killing Christians in the biggest Christian holidays.
On Easter Sunday, against the backdrop of the sham ceasefire, Volodymyr Zelenskyy shared a message of hope with his compatriots.
Evil has its hour, but God has his day. This is one of the meanings embedded in the story of Christ, his earthly suffering and death and his resurrection, and the fact that sooner or later, evil will retreat and life will win. Today, these words resonate in every Ukrainian heart.
In the same address in front of a church in Zaporizhia, just a few dozen kilometers from the front line, Zelenskyy thanked all those defending Ukraine. For TVP World, I'm Sonia Agatabishyan.
Strikes have continued across Ukraine despite a declared Easter ceasefire that Putin says was meant to test Kyiv's sincerity. So, how's Ukraine responding, and in what position does that leave the country? We turn now to our correspondent in Kyiv, Oz Chatterjee. Oz, any sign that the front lines are actually quieting down?
Not at all, not according to the Ukrainian government. The Ukrainian government report that Russia conducted at least 46 frontal operations in all directions on the front line. That's since 4 p.m. local time. So, deep into the supposed ceasefire by Putin, the Ukrainians are reporting at least 46 assaults on various axes. They've also reported at least 900 incidents of shelling and more than 400 FPV drone attacks across the front lines as well. So far from there being a ceasefire, attacks have continued. Russian attacks on Ukraine have continued throughout Easter Sunday. So it's been a particularly difficult night as well. Zelenskyy also conceded something in his nightly statement that unfortunately, some Ukrainian soldiers have been ambushed and killed in the Tourette's direction. Normally, this is not the kind of information that's revealed by the president, but really saying that these men were ambushed in the Tourette's direction is really saying, look, there is no ceasefire here. You're ambushing our men on our territory. So a big concession to make there that isn't normally made by Kyiv, but given the situation, the circumstances they're operating under, that seems to be why they've made that decision. Now, Zelenskyy also said this Easter has clearly proven that the only source of the war and the reason for its prolongation is Russia. We are ready to move towards peace and a complete, unconditional and honest ceasefire, which can last at least 30 days. But there's still no response from Russia on this. So the Ukrainians putting this back towards Putin there, saying we are ready to take a ceasefire and extend it much further than just Easter Sunday. All we've seen so far in Russian response has been further attacks, further shellings, further drone attacks on Ukrainian cities and ambushes of Ukrainian soldiers on the front line.
All right, thank you so much for the update, Oz. Happy Easter, and please do stay safe out there. Appreciate it. Ukrainians around the world are marking Easter far from home. They're holding tight to tradition as a way to stay connected to loved ones and their country. In Warsaw, displaced family gather to bless baskets and share moments of faith, hope, and remembrance, even as war continues back home. Anastasia Yanchenko has the story.
Easter is a holiday that brings people together wherever they are in the world. For Ukrainians, it holds a particularly deep meaning. This holiday symbolizes hope and rebirth. In Warsaw, as in many other cities abroad, Ukrainians who were forced to leave their homes come together to celebrate, in their own warm, traditional way, to feel, even for a moment, closer to home. People gather to bless their Easter baskets, each one unique, filled with essential holiday fare. Pascha, that is, traditional Ukrainian Easter bread, eggs, meats, and something personal that signifies a piece of home.
We have a family tradition of baking our own Easter bread and preparing a basket. Here we have the Easter bread, meat, eggs, cheese, and beetroot, all typical holiday food in Western Ukrainian culture.
For many, it's more than just a ritual. It is a way to feel a little closer to home, despite the distance.
There is no distance in tradition. This holiday is very significant for Ukrainians because we're deeply devout people. Even after the enemy's attack, having been forced to go abroad, we carry our faith with us, our Orthodox faith, which even wins the hearts of people in the countries we're in.
Olga is a typical example of the separation many Ukrainian families are experiencing. While she and her daughter are here in Poland like so many other Ukrainians, her brother is on the front line.
No matter where we are, we all celebrate Easter with hope and with thoughts of our loved ones, of our soldiers. My brother is on the front line, many of my friends are too, and every soldier out there, they're our family.
In these moments, even a short video call becomes a cherished gift. Despite the difficulties of the front line, soldiers still manage to hold on to the spirit of Easter as much as they can.
Yes, we have everything. We couldn't bless the baskets because the Russians didn't allow it. But volunteers sent us Easter bread, sausages, and eggs, so we could feel the holiday.
Just days before Easter, what many refer to as a true miracle occurred, when over 277 Ukrainian soldiers were returned home from Russian captivity. Still, the reality remains. While some Ukrainians celebrate abroad, others do so under the roar of drones and ballistic missiles, which haven't stopped. Ukrainian President Zelenskyy confirmed that despite Russia's promised ceasefire for the Easter holiday, shelling of Ukrainian cities has continued. And yet, they celebrate in their own way, because what unites everyone is hope. Hope that peace will come and families will be united like before the war.
There is no real holiday because we're not at home. There are no loved ones, no close family with me. We just want to finally sit together at our big family table.
They celebrate without being home with families. But at least with the Easter message of hope. This is how things are now.
The U.S. and Iran have wrapped up a fresh round of nuclear talks in Rome, described as constructive by both sides. But behind the scenes, Russia is emerging as a key player, offering diplomatic support to Tehran and positioning itself as a mediator. Aisha Abaja reports.
U.S. and Iranian officials concluded a second round of talks to reach a new nuclear deal through Oman's mediation.
As I said, the negotiations were held in a constructive atmosphere, and I can say that they are moving forward.
Just one day before the meeting, Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi said Russia was very helpful in offering diplomatic support for the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA, nuclear agreement, and this time they expect a similar support through their mediation.
From the Iranians' perspective, they are trying to strengthen their position by presenting themselves as a country which closely coordinates its foreign policy with more powerful states, namely Russia.
The JCPOA deal was made in 2015 between Iran and 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, all of whom have nuclear weapons as well as the EU. The goal of the deal was to limit Iran's nuclear program in exchange for lifting some economic sanctions.
It is a great honor for us to announce that we have reached an agreement on the Iranian nuclear issue.
But in 2018, during his first term, U.S. President Donald Trump pulled out of the deal and reimposed sanctions on Iran.
We will be instituting the highest level of economic sanction. Any nation that helps Iran in its quest for nuclear weapons could also be strongly sanctioned by the United States.
Now Moscow finds itself mediating between Washington and Tehran for a new deal, all while simultaneously engaged in direct negotiations with the U.S. about Ukraine.
In the Middle East, generally, Moscow is rather perceived as the ally of Iran.
Shahed drones have become the clearest symbol of Russia-Iran cooperation used by Moscow to bomb Ukrainian cities since early in the war. But can Putin also leverage this position for his own strategic interests in Ukraine?
There are significant structural differences between American approach to Iran and American approach to Russia.
I think if these negotiations fall apart, then there will be military strikes against Iranian nuclear sites and possibly some other infrastructure on Iran.
Talks resume next week in Oman as U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff moves into the next phase of the negotiations with Iran, aiming for a lasting nuclear deal with Tehran amid ongoing war in Ukraine.
I'm for stopping Iran, very simply, from having a nuclear weapon. They can't have a nuclear weapon.
For TVP World, I'm Aisha Abaja.
A bold new missile defense plan is taking shape in the United States. President Donald Trump is pushing for a golden dome to shield the nation from advanced threats. With staggering costs and top tech firms like SpaceX potentially involved, the project is raising hopes and serious questions. Konrad Gorlinsky has more.
Israel has an Iron Dome. There are talks in Europe about a sky shield. But Donald Trump, of course, will need to have a Golden Dome.
I'm asking Congress to fund a state-of-the-art Golden Dome missile defense shield to protect our homeland, all made in the USA.
The Golden Dome, expected to involve investments in the hundreds of billions of dollars, will be a high-tech defense system capable of protecting the U.S. against ballistic, hypersonic, and cruise missiles. And now, according to a recent Reuters report, Elon Musk's SpaceX, along with software company Palantir and drone maker Anduril, is set to be among the frontrunners to play a major role in developing it. Following the report, however, Elon Musk took to the platform X to deny any such plans.
SpaceX hasn't tried to bid for any contract in this regard. Our strong preference would be to stay focused on taking humanity to Mars. If the president asks us to help in this regard, we will do so, but I hope that other companies, not SpaceX, can do this.
Well, whether it'll be SpaceX or one of the 180 companies that have already expressed interest in contributing to the project, what will it entail? Will it be just a much larger version of Israel's Iron Dome system?
comparing Golden Dome to Iron Dome is actually not even comparing apples to oranges. It's comparing apples to battleships. Because Iron Dome is a system, ground-based system.
Watchtower, this is Looking Glass. We have a missile launch detection.
The current idea would involve the deployment of up to 1,000 satellites to track missiles, with 200 attack satellites to neutralize them. SpaceX isn't expected to handle the weaponization, but contractors like Lockheed Martin are already involved. Now, SpaceX may offer its role in the Golden Dome as a subscription service, similar to its deal with NASA. With Trump pushing for speed, this model could bypass Pentagon procurement rules for quicker deployment, though it raises concerns about pricing and oversight.
It's kind of different with big arms programs. We don't really know how this offer would look like. Would SpaceX be capable of selling this service to another country? Like, this is a vital national security system.
If it does, SpaceX estimates early design costs between $6 to $10 billion and may repurpose existing spy satellites for the project. As speed is of essence, SpaceX may have an edge due to its Falcon 9 rockets and existing satellite fleet. Many questions still remain regarding the feasibility of the entire system itself, given that multiple studies have concluded that it's a bad idea, expensive, and vulnerable.
Long before Easter was celebrated, people across the world marked the arrival of spring with customs honoring the cyclical rebirth of nature. Many of these customs now survive only in memory, tradition, or rare archival footage.
In these archival images from mid-20th century Poland, we catch a glimpse of traditions that have long since faded from daily life.
Easter in Poland is a mixture of, we have a little bit of Christianity in it and also a little bit of other customs. Most of them, in fact, are somehow focused on Easter Monday, especially those related to water, to plants, generally to the growth of everything.
Śmigus Dingus, or Wet Monday, as seen here in historical depictions, is a day when water is splashed and spilled in every direction. It's wild, messy, and full of joy. And boys love to use the opportunity to chase after girls.
The custom of pouring water over each other or smacking each other with willow twigs was meant to bring luck and success. That's why young women were quite eager to get splashed. Of course, painted eggs are pre-Christian. In folk traditions, all these aspects are merging. The egg signifies life. A chick comes out of an egg, so it also gives us hope.
Przed Wielkanocą, jeżeli 3 tygodnie przed tym, to już jest taka największa moja choroba. Już mnie się robota nic nie trzyma, bo stale te pisanki chodzą za mną, stale te wzory. Już zawsze się to pisze na karteczkach, to mama mi przynosi, podkłada różne karteczki, różne wzory, jakie najstarodawniejsze.
Here we have different decorated eggs from Poland, from all around Poland, and also different techniques. So, for example, we have a batik technique, which is the most, almost the oldest technique that is used. This is from Kurpie region. There is another one which is the opposite of this technique, when you have an egg which you put color on it first and then you scratch it. So it is the opposite of the batik technique. Again, here, for example, we have another technique used in Łowicz region.
Another distinctive tradition that remains alive in many Polish towns and villages is the Easter Monday masquerade.
Easter masqueraders are doing damage, generally. We call it like that, ritual damage. So they're pouring water on women, they are beating people, also with some pieces of plants, for example, willow. But this is everything about doing fertility magic, in fact. So they receive something back, those masqueraders. Those are eggs, Easter eggs especially, those colorful decorated eggs. Food, alcohol, some money. Because if you don't give them back, something like that, it means bad luck for you.
So what's the most bizarre or unique Easter traditions that you haven't encountered across Poland?
There are a lot of, because every local community has its own. Bziuki is a custom, but it's also the name of the group that does something. And what they are doing is they're spitting the fire during the Easter Holy Mass.
So if around Easter time you are given an egg or smacked with a willow twig, just remember, while some of these customs live on, others now exist only in the echoes of tradition and old footage.
In a gesture framed as humanitarian, President Vladimir Putin announced a 30-hour unilateral Easter ceasefire in Ukraine. Yet, with battlefield reports of ongoing clashes and immediate skepticism from Kyiv and Western allies, questions abound about the Kremlin's intentions. Is this a genuine overture towards peace or a carefully timed signal to Washington amid diplomatic fatigue? Joining us today on TVP World to examine what lies behind Moscow's move is Adam Yessa, a news director at TVP World. Hello, sir, and welcome to World News Tonight.
Good evening.
So, this very brief Russian Easter ceasefire, how should we go about interpreting it? Do you think it's a tactical pause, a symbolic message, or a test of international reaction?
It's just another fake gesture without real meaning.
Obviously so, but we're also curious about whether or not the target audience is Washington, D.C., the global south, Ukraine, internal, external. Where do you think this kind of fake is targeting towards?
Well, I think by now everyone realizes that President Zelenskyy of Ukraine was right in the Oval Office when he said Putin cannot be trusted. And I think events of the previous week in the meeting in Paris, where the U.S. delegation signaled disappointment with Mr. Putin, it's clear that none of his engagement in these peace negotiations with the United States produced anything tangible. So it's becoming clear, to the Americans at least, that there is absolutely no progress on the Russian side.
So in this case, do you think the message is going to be targeted towards Washington, D.C., saying that we are the one that wants peace and somehow blame it on the Ukrainians for the ceasefire not stopping? Or do you think there's an attempt at stalling things out, since Marco Rubio has recently stated that the Americans might pull away if peace negotiation doesn't come into fruition?
That's a good question, because at the end of the day, we are not yet clear what was Mr. Rubio's real message and to whom? Was it a message to Ukraine and Russia and the Europeans saying, you know, unless things move, we're going to just lose interest in all of this? Or was this a message to Mr. Putin saying we're losing patience and we're not prepared to travel? I mean, in Secretary Rubio's own words, we're not prepared to travel the world to all these meetings, not to see any movement on Russia's part. So I think we're reaching a point where if there were any illusions on the American side that Mr. Putin genuinely wants a ceasefire, these hopes seem to be dashed, unless something happens in the next few weeks. And I think the important context here to mention, of course, are the talks about the Iran nuclear deal, because we can see that some kind of trilateral dialogue is going on there between the U.S., Russia, and Iran. So the question is this part of a package, or is it a separate issue? We don't know that yet.
Right, like you mentioned, there's still a lot of questions remain when it comes to this trilateral talk. But if we were to read the tea leaves a little bit, do you think there's a possibility that Russia is willing to give up some of Iranian interests in pursuit of their own interests? Or what would you say is kind of behind closed doors?
I think, you know, in principle, the Trump administration wants to pull Russia away from China, and it wants to weaken this alliance of hostile powers, meaning Iran, Russia, China, and North Korea. So for some reason, they decided that Russia is ready for some kind of a deal. They probably assume that Putin is not achieving his goals in Ukraine. They realize that the losses on the Russian side are huge, both in men and equipment, and there's very little progress on the ground, on the battlefront. So they reached the conclusion that Mr. Putin was ready for a deal. And they dangled a business deal in front of Mr. Putin, easing sanctions, bringing Russia back into the international community, joining G7 perhaps, or G8 then. And, you know, so they basically hope that Putin will respond positively, that he's tired of this war and he wants to be serious about it. But as we just discussed, there is nothing tangible from Mr. Putin. The 30-day ceasefire was announced several weeks ago now. Nothing is happening. And in the meantime, the 100 days that President Trump promised is approaching fast, you know, to have a ceasefire. Mm-hmm. But simultaneously, the Americans are also pursuing Iran, and they're under pressure from Israel, as we know, to become perhaps, you know, to do something forceful, like bombing the installations or in some other way to put pressure on Iran to end their nuclear project. So in that, Trump is trying to combine these two negotiations, but in a sense that makes it a little bit more difficult, and still we have very little tangible result.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of strategic maneuver here when it comes to all different kind of geopolitical partners. Now, recently, President Zelenskyy also mentioned China's involvement in Russia's war against Ukraine. Do you think that has something to do with the fact that it is observable that Trump wants to pull away from the war in Ukraine and focus more on China? And like you mentioned earlier, Trump's kind of attempt to pry Russia and China relationship apart. Maybe Zelenskyy is planning on emphasizing that to make Trump understand that these two essentially are kind of two sides of the same coin, and you can't just look at them in a vacuum.
I think the strategic objective of the Trump administration is to prize Russia away from China. And, you know, it's a viable objective. Many analysts, foreign policy analysts and strategists, believe that this is very hard to achieve, that the level of connection now and the dependence that Russia has built on China is such, and their joint interest in weakening the collective West is so strong that this may not happen. But then you could also argue that unless the US administration tries to do that, we won't know. So I think they're pushing hard on this, but whether this succeeds is a matter of time. So far, again, I'm sorry, I'm sounding like a broken record. There's very little tangible effect of these diplomatic movements by the United States, maybe with one exception. And that is, I will return to Secretary Rubio's visit to Europe last week. Initially, the United States thought that they would be able to talk to Putin directly, bypassing the Europeans and bypassing Zelenskyy for that matter. Now, I think there's a realization in Washington that the Europeans will be needed for any kind of settlement. And what's more, that the Europeans and Zelenskyy were probably right, warning that it's not going to be an easy walk to bring Mr. Putin round to a serious peace negotiation.
Right. I think the reality is starting to set in, and the Americans are starting to realize that as well. Thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it. And thanks for being with us on World News Tonight.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. And thank you for tuning into this edition of World News Tonight. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.